So at long last, I finished the first roll film. It took quite a while. 72 shots ends up being a lot more than you think, even in the digital age. And that's perhaps because when I shoot film, I tend to not shoot a whole bunch in rapid succession or take multiple shots of the same subject, even though at certain times I probably should. In any case, I finally finished that first roll film, but and I'll talk about that in a separate video. What I really wanted to talk about today is my next round of modifications. Just what you wanted to hear, right? So with this camera, I think one thing I did was I plugged this hole in the back. I found a screw, I knocked the head of it down, smoothed it out, and you can sort of see how that came out. Because that sort of this ugly hole in the back seemed like it really needed something to cover it. So this is just a small screw that's been rounded down and shortened, and it works well enough. I also coated it with some silicone before I popped it in there. That, of course, was to prevent any fouling of an electrical contact should there be one in there. This port is for the remote control, which I do not have and probably will not purchase. So in one of the videos, I don't recall which, I talked about the focusing this camera. I think it was the original video. And as I mentioned, I have this little lens shade. I shot mostly with the lens shade on, and so what I would end up doing is reaching around like this and pre-focusing the lens. I mentioned that I'm not a big fan of tabbed focusing, but I think with this camera it would really help. So I have two possible solutions for this, and let's take a look at them now. One actually is marked lens tab, and the other one is a lens tab. Well, what do you know? So two different ideas. I'm not sure which one will be useful. Each has its drawbacks. So let's take a look and see what those are. So this one, of course, would work well enough. The only issue is that it's actually wider than the focusing ring. This part isn't. However, this little extended part is. So what I would need to do is cut it down. This also attaches with an adhesive, and this adhesive really was meant to stick to a smooth barrel. As you can see, this is serrated. It is smooth. It's more striped, so you know there's a smooth area, serrations, smooth serrations, and so on and so on. It might work, it might not work. It might actually require some additional adhesive. I'm not really sure. I haven't tried it yet. The second one is just called a lens tab, and you can see it's small, sold in small, medium, and large. I wasn't sure which one I needed. I knew I wouldn't need a large. I didn't think I would need a medium, so I bought the small one. This is pretty slick. This is a rubber ring. This is all rubber. And so the small actually works perfectly, as you can see. With one drawback. So even with the focusing ring, I mean with the lens shade on, for example, now you can just simply use this to focus the lens. So what's the drawback? The drawback is you can't see any of the little pictograms that are on top of the lens, nor can you see your distance marker. However, that is easy enough to correct by just painting a small little hash mark, which of course would correspond with the line that's marked on the collar of the lens right here, the focusing collar. I really like this solution. I think one way you might be able to get around that is to put a series of dots here. I'm not a good enough artist, and I don't have a pencil or a pen fine enough to be able to reproduce those little pictograms. I could probably do the infinity mark, which is a sideways 8, and I might be able to do a flower, some of those others, maybe, maybe not. Not sure. As you can see on the ring itself, there's not a whole lot of space in between, so perhaps I could do one on the opposite side, and then just put little hash marks to indicate where those markers would be. The way it works right now is if you use this ring, this solution, you don't see those pictograms in the viewfinder, and that really is a nice little focusing aid to be able to see those in the viewfinder. Let's try cutting this down. That'll be the first one. That might be the easiest task. Obviously, there's going to be some risk involved. One of the risks is going to be cutting myself. I believe that both of these items are made of silicone rubber, which should make them easy to cut because all you really need to do is slice them with a sharp knife. And silicone rubber has the added benefit of not rotting over time like regular rubber would. So we'll need a cutting board. And so what do you know, I happen to have a cutting board here. This is something my dad made many, many years ago, and I've really used it for workshop purposes. I think he made it for my mom for the kitchen. I don't know how I came to have it, but anyway, I own it. So it continues to see use, just not as a food cutting board. Guess it could be used that, but that's not how I use it. Perhaps perhaps an X-Acto knife will work. So the advantage of cutting this down is that it doesn't interfere with any of the distance markings, and it doesn't cover up the pictograms. I bought two of these pieces in case I screw up one. I mean, in case I screw up one so badly that it can't be fixed. Okay. So what's nice, it's actually sort of nice because you can see the line to follow here, right? So I'm just going to follow this line here with moderate pressure, not heavy pressure, and just take a series of slices. So what happens is when you come in with real heavy pressure, this is where you can get cut. You know, because you're pressing so hard that you're not paying attention, and if the X-Acto knife slips, you have a big oops. Well, that actually came out pretty quickly. It came off very cleanly. So because there is a small mark here, I think I'll put this against the body. Let's take a look. And now you can see how this would fit on. You'll notice that it sits a bit higher, but not enough to really cause any problems. Let's see if this will actually work. And when you fix something like this to a surface, the fewer times you lift it, the better. Actually feels pretty good. Now let's pop this on. Yes, and so the key is it doesn't interfere, it doesn't drag on the lens shade at all. And so now I have a nice little focusing tab. And so what makes this easier is now I can just look through the viewfinder and just either push or pull. Remember, with the lens shade on, I really couldn't reach the lens and grasp it in a traditional manner, which is, you know, pinch left and right. This gives me tab focusing, and yeah, I sort of like it. We'll try this for a while. We'll come back to it and see how we like it. Went on pretty cleanly. And because it is just an adhesive, it's not on there for life. So if, at some point, if I said, you know what, I really don't want that on anymore, it wouldn't be that difficult to remove. By the way, this is known as a vented lens shade. And this, of course, would refer to these cutouts on the back, which are known as vents. It's also slightly angled. It's not a straight cylindrical lens shade. And so part of the vented lens shade does show up in the viewfinder. This this outermost ring here. However, it's just a small dark line. And so what do I do about that? I really just ignore it. I just sort of mentally ignore it when I'm framing my photo. Remember, remember the viewfinder isn't for critical focusing. It's not used in the same way as an SLR or even a mirrorless camera. It's simply there to frame your shot. And because it is a viewfinder camera, I always think of the frame lines as being approximate and not 100% accurate. So, like I said, it's there. I just ignore it, and it works well enough. I've done this with other cameras when I've used lens shade and it intrudes on part of the viewfinder. I just ignore it. The one final thing I did was I took that little piece that I cut off and I attached it to the opposite side of the lens. Now I have two focusing tabs and they both seem to work pretty well. The cost of the small tab, the one that I trimmed, was about $2.50, although I think I paid like $2 in shipping. The rubber ring tab, that was like $12 or $13. I probably will figure out how to use that with a different camera. In any case, I'm going to move ahead with this solution and see how I like it. I think it's going to work out pretty well. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks again for watching. If you're so inclined, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have a comment, please feel free to leave it in the area below or send me an email at contact@camera-talk.net. And see you on the next video.